Hello everyone, and welcome back to Truck Talk with Liz. This is Liz Astor, your calm and friendly driver, bringing you along as I journey through Euro Truck Simulator 2. Today marks our 5th episode, and I'm genuinely excited to share this time with you. If you're new here, this series is all about quiet reflection, gentle chatter, and a cozy atmosphere in the cabin as we drive along. Right now, I'm in the driver's seat of my trusted truck, carrying a pressure tank from Swinoujscie in Poland all the way to Valladolid in Spain. We have quite a drive ahead of us, crossing multiple countries and passing numerous checkpoints. If you've been following so far, you know each journey has a bit of personal philosophy and day-to-day reflections woven in. My background shapes a lot of my thinking, though I don't directly bring up those theories here. Instead, I try to present a calm corner for conversation and contemplation. Let's do some introductions. With me in the cabin, I have 3 special companions. First is Mish the Fish, my enthusiastic shark plushie friend who loves art, food, culture, and people. And he's also a very big fan of anime and manga. Mish was away for a few episodes, recovering from a flipper injury, but today is his first day back. He's still feeling a little bit sore, so let's be kind and patient as he gradually settles back in. He's had a couple of occupational therapy sessions, and that's made a huge difference. Second is Andre, my stoic, dangling ornament skull, who loves reading and quietly corrects me whenever I get my facts wrong. And last, but certainly not least, is Maxwell, our resident cat, who basically does whatever cats do best. Naps, stares out the window, occasionally wanders around the cabin, and finds that one sunny spot to curl up in. In case you missed the last episode, we had Mish's twin brother, Mark the Shark, riding along in Mish's spot. Mark is a bit of a fun-loving jock, far more extroverted than Mish. It was interesting to see how he livened up the cabin, even though he can be a bit of a goofball at times. Still, he has a big heart, and he took over wonderfully while Mish was gone. Now that Mish is back, I just want to say, please continue to send your well wishes and supportive thoughts his way. I'm sure he's gonna appreciate it a lot. Before we go any further, I'll outline our topic for the day. We'll be discussing something called the Sorites Paradox. This puzzle involves vague terms like heap, bald, old, and so on. It's the classic paradox that says if 1 grain of wheat isn't a heap, 2 grains aren't a heap, and if 2 grains aren't, then 3 grains aren't, continuing up to a huge number, leading to the strange conclusion that no number of grains forms a heap. Or, conversely, from the premise that 1 million grains do form a heap, you can argue step by step down to saying that even a single grain is a heap. It's a contradiction in how we handle borderline cases in language. We'll take our time chatting about how philosophers and logicians have approached this fascinating riddle. Alright, so let's get rolling. We started this journey at 1505 in Swinoujscie, Poland. So let's ease our way onto the roads and head towards Germany. The route is scenic at the moment, with gentle breezes typical of March weather. The roads here are fairly smooth, and the traffic isn't too intense. I love this time of day, as the sunlight still has that soft, almost sleepy feel. Mish the Fish is talking to me right now. He's saying, "Liz, I just want to thank you for letting me come back in the truck. I've missed sharing recommendations and chit-chat with everyone. My flipper still aches sometimes, but I'm feeling a lot better now." No problem, Mish. It's so good to have you back. We have all missed you, though Mark the Shark did keep things entertaining. Maxwell is curled up near the passenger's seat, half asleep. Andre is quietly gazing forward, maybe planning to read something once we're on our long, straight stretch. Meanwhile, I'm checking my mirrors, making sure everything is secure. So, about the Sorites Paradox. The word Sorites comes from the Greek word for heap, soros. It's been around since ancient Greece, credited to the Megarian philosopher Eubulides. He proposed a puzzle that can be phrased in different ways, all focused on vague terms with fuzzy boundaries. For example, is there a clear point at which a person stops being bald when you add one hair at a time? Or is there an exact point at which a number of grains turns from not a heap to heap? A big part of this puzzle has to do with everyday language and how we handle borderline cases. We rarely think about the precise point at which bald becomes not bald, or heap becomes not heap, or old becomes not old. But the Sorites Paradox highlights that difficulty in a formal argument. In typical presentations, you might see it laid out like this. 1 grain of wheat isn't a heap. 2. If 1 grain isn't a heap, then 2 grains aren't a heap. 3. If 2 grains aren't, then 3 grains aren't. 4. So on and so forth. 5. Finally, you get to the claim that even 1,000,000 grains aren't a heap, which is clearly counterintuitive. Or you can argue the other way and say that if 1,000,000 grains is a heap, removing 1 grain can stop it from being a heap. So 999,999 grains is also a heap, and so on and so forth until even 1 grain is a heap. Either direction you go, you end up with a weird conclusion. The puzzle is, how can apparently sound reasoning from apparently sound assumptions lead you astray? I'll let you ponder about that for a minute. We are now passing the border into Germany. No issues at the border crossing, as both countries are part of the Schengen area, meaning open borders. The region we are entering is Mecklenburg-Vorpommern. It's known for its shoreline along the Baltic, dotted with old towns. The roads are wide and quite pleasant to drive on. Mish is leaning forward, looking out at the green fields with interest. He's saying, "I always love how open this region is. You can see so far off into the distance." Yes, it's pretty relaxing. A nice open stretch as we head deeper into Germany. We drive for a short while in comfortable quiet. Andre is reading a small paperback, Maxwell stretches out, and I continue to reflect on the paradox that we'll be unpacking soon. We've entered Brandenburg, and I'm just about to make a stop to refuel. The fuel cost 1,476 euros, which is quite a hefty cost. That is sometimes the downside of hauling a heavy cargo over long distances. You burn a lot of diesel, but that is part of the trucking life. While we were fueling, I got the chance to stretch my legs, and Maxwell hopped out to sniff around the station, though he quickly retreated when he realized there were people there. He's still a little bit shy around strangers. Now back on the road, let's continue discussing these ideas about vagueness. One typical approach is to argue about bivalence, the principle that statements must be either true or false. Many philosophical approaches to the Sorites Paradox question whether this principle holds for vague terms. Some say statements about borderline cases might fail to be simply true or simply false. They propose multi-valued logics, where you can have statements that occupy some middle ground, or truth values that come in degrees. Others, called epistemicists, say that bald, heap, and similar words really do have sharp boundaries, even if we can never know where those boundaries lie. On that view, every person is either strictly old or not old, strictly bald or not bald, strictly a heap or not a heap, though we remain ignorant of the exact cutoff. That approach sometimes sounds counterintuitive to some people, but it does maintain classical logic, two-valued logic where all statements are either true or false. Meanwhile, there are supervaluationists who try to keep classical logic but drop bivalence, at least in some sense. They say a statement is super true if it's true on every way of making the terms precise, and super false if it's false under every way of making them precise. Then there are borderline statements that are neither super true nor super false. This is meant to capture the idea that sometimes it's indeterminate whether a word applies or not. That helps handle borderline cases. We've just crossed into Saxony-Anhalt, and it's getting darker out. The sunset has faded, so I switch on the headlights. Nighttime is here. The roads are fairly calm. It's a good moment for more reflective thoughts. Mish the fish says, "I love nighttime drives. It's a good time to watch the glow of passing vehicles. Also, it makes for a nice chance to chat about something philosophical." Exactly, Mish. I sometimes think about how these shifting conditions, daylight, darkness, parallel those fuzzy boundaries in language. One moment you have daylight, next you have night, and it's tricky to define the exact moment day turns into night. That's essentially the same fuzziness the paradox highlights. Mish says, Yes, that's a wonderful comparison. Andre, quietly but a little sternly, says, Be careful not to overextend that analogy, though, Liz. In everyday parlance, we might define night by the sun's position below the horizon, and that can be astronomically precise. But for something like heap, it's not about astronomy, it's about how language works. Good point. Let's keep that in mind. Now we're moving from Lower Saxony into Hesse. Before long, we'll arrive at Kassel, which is a hub in central Germany. I want to take a few extra moments to talk about Kassel, as it's often associated with culture and history, known for its collections of classical art and for being a place of significance to the Brothers Grimm. They spent time in this region collecting folk stories. It's also a major transport intersection. We've rolled into Kassel now. The city lights shimmer in the distance. Even though it's night, there's something peaceful about driving through a region that holds so much history. Perhaps that's part of the enjoyment, traveling in the present while passing through areas that have shaped stories, legends, and older forms of narrative that might connect to how language evolves. It's also a place that occasionally holds contemporary events, mixing tradition with modern developments. When I drive through Kassel, I'm reminded that languages and the words in them grow and shift with time. The classical puzzle of the Sorites relates to how these words gain and lose clarity, or remain fuzzy in some respects, through centuries of usage. Could it be that we've always been dealing with borderline language, only noticing the puzzle when we try to formalize it? We slow a bit for traffic. Mish looks out the window, though it's hard to see much detail in the dark. Maxwell's whiskers twitch as he peers around. Andre has put his book aside to watch me handle the curve. Leaving Castle, we continued south. After some time, it began to rain. The roads were slick, so I dropped my speed a notch for safety. We passed by Frankfurt am Main, a finance center with a distinctive skyline. Then we rolled towards Mannheim, entering Baden-Württemberg. We drive through part of the night, and slowly the sky will begin to lighten. By the time we're well along, nighttime will have ended. It's a new day. The rain might still be coming down, but the sky is definitely lighter. Let's take a moment now to bring up something less abstract and more personal. I recently watched a documentary called For Sama, directed by Valladolid and Edward Watts. It made a very strong impact on me. I am always curious about different cultures, and I encourage you to watch more documentaries about real people's lives around the world. For Sama follows Al-Khadib's life in Halab, Aleppo, Syria, during a time of intense conflict. She documents her experiences, including her work, her family life, and the relentless difficulties they face. There are small moments of normal living, like cooking or telling jokes, but they happen against a background of constant bombings, especially targeted at places like hospitals and schools, which is absolutely heartbreaking. There is a special focus on her daughter, Sama, who is born during the events filmed. It's remarkable how a film balances hope and despair in such a direct way. There is no sugarcoating of the horror. It shows everyday tasks alongside the unimaginable. It left me feeling that a common desire, peace for our families, can be so fraught under oppressive systems. That everyday courage in the face of that adversity is something I hold a lot of respect for. It is a valuable record of events that the world should pay attention to. The film stands as documentation in addition to being a personal memoir. It's one thing to hear about conflict from a distance, and it's another to watch someone's daily life under siege. While it is difficult to watch, it seems important. Our words describing conflict often feel blurred too, vague at times, because it's hard to fully measure the impact, but the film's directness helps us glimpse the scale of what is happening. We continue onward, eventually crossing into Switzerland. The scenic roads are well maintained here, and despite the rain, things will settle and the weather will be breezy with faint sunbeams. We pass through Zurich, a city known for its tidy streets and business districts. Then we approach the area known as Zurich West, which has blossomed over the years into a lively quarter with old factories converted into art spaces, theatres and restaurants. I've always admired how locations can transform while still preserving a sense of heritage. The older industrial vibe remains part of the place's identity, even as it's used for new purposes. That sense of continuity and transformation might reflect how language changes too. It holds onto older features while adopting fresh elements. We drive carefully through Zurich West. The traffic can get dense, but fortunately we are here at a time when it isn't too busy. Mesh is glued to the window, curious about the modern buildings we are passing. Maxwell dozes in his seat, unconcerned by the bustle outside. I'd like to weave in another dimension of the Sorites Paradox while we're here, talking about how some philosophers argue that the puzzle is a direct consequence of the way meaning and usage connect. The philosopher Timothy Williamson, for example, is known for advocating the epistemic theory, which states that there are indeed sharp cutoffs for vague terms, but we just can't know them. Others propose that these terms are truly indefinite, and that's part of how language works. Could the city's ongoing renewal be used as an analogy for that? We have these old industrial spaces that slowly transform, one detail at a time, and we can never pinpoint the exact moment a neighborhood changed from industrial zone to trendy cultural area. This is reminiscent of the process in a Sorites sequence, one small shift at a time until we look back and see a big difference. All of a sudden, we receive instructions to pull into the nearest way station for a vehicle inspection. come to a stop. A polite official checks her documents and has a quick glance at the truck. They inform me that it's not in perfect technical state, which usually just means that there are a few wear and tear issues that could be tidied up. The cargo plus the truck weighs in at a solid 31 tons metric. That's well within the permissible range, so we're clear to move on. Just a little note to schedule some maintenance once I can take a break in a bigger depot. Andre turns to me and says, "Always good to keep everything in proper order, eh?" "Yes, definitely. I'll make sure to book a maintenance slot as soon as we can. Safety first." With that quick pit stop behind us, we keep on going. Next, we tackle the Furka Pass, a high mountain pass in Switzerland. Let's give it special attention because it's such a famous route, known for its twists and turns up in the higher altitude. Even though we're in a simulator, you can feel your concentration sharpen. The roads can get narrow. The vistas here are majestic, glimpses of snow-capped peaks and winding valleys. Of course, we want to keep our eyes on the road, but the atmosphere is definitely energizing. Mish the Fish says, "This is breathtaking. I love how crisp the air looks." Agreed. Even in a simulation, it feels fresh. But let's be extra cautious though. These bends are no joke. After winding down carefully, we eventually descend out of the pass. We're heading towards Bern. The sky starts to darken once again and the rain returns. The wipers are going, the headlights are on. Another day turning into nighttime. The pattern of day and night, along with changing weather, reminds me again of that unstoppable progression, step by step, that the Sorites Paradox tries to capture, from one state to another, each small change seeming insignificant, yet eventually creating a large shift. Now, let's talk about Genève. This city sits at the southwestern tip of Switzerland, where the lake meets the river Rhône. It's recognized for diplomacy and international organizations. My mind often wanders to ideas about universal discussions. Genève is famously home to many agencies that bring different nations together. Perhaps that's relevant to how we talk about vague words and borderline cases too. People from varied linguistic backgrounds might each have slightly different stances on how to define heap, bald, tall, rich, or old. Does that mean the puzzle's resolution might differ from one language to another? Possibly. Philosophers debate whether vagueness is universal or language specific. As we roll by Genève, the rain keeps falling and we see the watery flow of streetlights on the roads. Once or twice I catch a glimpse of the famous lake. Even in the drizzle, it's serene. André, stoic as ever, stares out at the dark outline of the city, no doubt recalling some historical tidbits. We cross into France. The region of Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes extends its welcome. The sky is still dark, but it will start to brighten again after a few hours on the highway. We stop for another refuel. This time we paid 1,473 euros. These repeated fill-ups are a reminder of how far we're traveling. While fueling, We shared some quiet conversation, and Maxwell hopped onto my lap momentarily, purring while I scratched behind his ear. A short distance later, we pass near Lyon, a vibrant city known for its gastronomic background. Good food is a big interest for Mish, so he perks up thinking about the local specialties. The rain stops and eventually nighttime ends, letting in the gentle morning light. The roads become busier again with daytime traffic. Now that the weather has cleared, I want to mention something else I watched recently, The Elusive Samurai, an anime that Mish recommended. It's set in a historical context, following Hojo Tokiyuki, the heir of the Kamakura shogunate. The show is lively, weaving comedic elements into battle sequences, and is surprisingly entertaining for a piece that also depicts quite a bit of violence and conflict. The story involves betrayal and survival, with Tokiyuki trying to claim his homeland. The interesting part is that even though it's based on real events, it employs an offbeat animation style and comedic timing that lighten the tone. When I watched it, I found it refreshing that the anime doesn't take itself too seriously. The action is punchy, the characters have distinct personalities, and the animation leaps between comedic exaggeration and dramatic confrontation. There is some content that might be uncomfortable though, like gore and body horror, but overall, if you're open to a shonen style experience with a dash of silliness, it could be worth a look. It reminds me that sometimes we can approach complex or even grim subject matter through a more entertaining lens. That's a bit like the Sorites Paradox too. It's a serious puzzle about logic, but it can also be posed in playful ways. Mish tells me right now, yes, exactly. I love how the visuals match the wacky storytelling. It's such a contrast to other series that I've seen that stay very rigid in style. Totally. And I appreciate your suggestion, Mish. It was a good watch. as we cruise onwards, we passed by Clermont-Ferrand, known for its old buildings and a dormant volcano in the distance. Soon, we'll be heading to a smaller commune called Peyrat-le-Château, which I want to highlight because it's not usually on big tourist maps, yet it has a quiet charm that's perfect for a contemplative break. We'll be there in a little bit. And here we are in Peyrat-le-Château. If we were physically there, you would find a simpler countryside atmosphere with local produce markets and very friendly residents. Even though we're talking about the puzzle of vagueness, places like Peyrat-le-Château remind me that there's also a straightforward side to life. Fresh air, local cheeses, fresh bread. And as we're gonna pass through, the rain will start again, lightly at first, and then heavier. I will slow down a bit to keep traction on the wet roads. Maxwell, unimpressed by the gloom, will curl up to nap. And as we will push through the region, gently meandering along these less crowded roads, the patter of rain on the windshield will make for a soothing background, reminiscent of our earlier nighttime drive. The next major point is Toulouse, recognized for its distinctive terracotta brick buildings that give it the nickname La Ville Rose. The rain will eventually stop as we approach. Since we've been on the road for a while, let's do a quick summary of the Sorites Paradox solutions we've mentioned so far. We have 5 solutions. The first one is epistemic theory. Vague words have sharp cutoffs, we just can't know them. Secondly, we have supervaluationism. We define supertruth and superfalsity to account for borderline cases. Thirdly, many-valued logics. Instead of 2 truth values, we might have infinitely many degrees of truth. Fourthly, we have contextualism. The meaning, and thus the extension of vague words, shifts depending on context, so what counts as heap in one context might not in another. And finally, we have radical views. Some hold that the paradox can't be resolved, or that we should just accept certain extreme conclusions like maybe everyone's bald, or maybe everything is a heap. No single approach has universal acceptance. Each tries to handle borderline cases in its own manner. Philosophers keep debating whether it's best to keep classical logic intact or relax it, or if we should keep bivalence or discard it. That's part of why the Sorites Paradox remains so noteworthy. We continue towards Lac, an area known for its industrial complex related to gas production. I'm gonna shine a spotlight on it because it's the heart of the region's economy. Large installations, pipes, and cooling towers dot the horizon, a sign that heavy industry has shaped the area's identity. It's quite a striking zone, especially when you consider how it stands out against the green countryside. If you're a bit of an industry enthusiast, it can be oddly fascinating to see. If you're more into nature, it might feel imposing. Either way, it's a memorable place to pass through. Then we head towards Les Forges d'Abel, also in southwestern France, near the Pyrenees. This area once had forges and industries operating, and some traces remain. The scenery changes from industrial complexity to more rural farmland and mountain silhouettes in the distance. The roads might twist and turn a bit, so I keep a firm grip on the steering wheel. Mish the Fish says, "Liz, it's always so interesting how these industrial zones pop up in small corners of the countryside." Yes, it's a reflection of local resources and historical developments. Makes me think about borderline definitions again. Is this region primarily industrial or rural? You can't label it neatly as one or the other, especially at the boundaries. Eventually, we crossed into Spain. The signage changed, the language changed, but the sense of calm on the road continues. We came upon Canfranc Estación, a spot known for its large historic railway station. Then onto Jaca, a small city in the foothills of the Pyrenees. By now, the sky is dimming once more and nighttime sets in. The repeated shift between day and night is almost mesmerizing on such a long drive. I'd like to segue into mentioning a book I recently read. Jane Austen's Bookshelf, a rare book collector's quest to find the women writers who shaped a legend, by Rebecca Romney. If you're curious about literature, history, or the craft of collecting rare books, it's a wonderful read. Romney investigates the women authors that Jane Austen herself was likely reading, referencing, or inspired by. She also recounts her own process of searching for these sometimes forgotten texts. Some of these writers were popular in the time but have fallen into obscurity, overshadowed by others or simply neglected by the literary canon. The book is thorough, with chapters on each author, details of the writers' lives, and how their works tied into Austen's interests. Romney's passion for collecting rare editions adds another level of fascination. For me, it recalled how language changes so much over the centuries. Words we find vague today might have been used differently in Austen's era. The discussions around vagueness might have looked different then, but the underlying puzzle could still exist in the sense that people always have borderline categories, like what counts as a successful female author. Romney's book is packed with details, possibly more than casual readers might expect, but if you enjoy diving into lesser-known historical facts, you'll find it rewarding. Mish the Fish turns to me and says, "I bet it's a revelation to see how many women were actually writing successfully back then but never got the same spotlight." Absolutely, Mish. It was a reminder that no single author, not even Jane Austen, exists in a vacuum. They're part of a bigger fabric of writers, many of whom deserve renewed recognition. Pressing on, we passed by Pamplona, famous for its running of the bulls, and eventually Burgos, known for its impressive cathedral and medieval heritage. The road is quiet at this hour, headlights shining over the asphalt. There is a sense of anticipation as we are getting closer and closer to our final stop. Finally, we roll into Valladolid. This city has a significant past. Once the capital of the United Castile and Leon Kingdom and recognized for its links to Spanish history. These days, it's also a modern space with universities, a dynamic cultural scene, and a warm feel. After hours upon hours of driving, we will park in the designated area, cargo intact, pressure tank delivered. We've made it. Perfect timing too. I just got a notification that the local staff is up and ready to receive this shipment. Mish the First turns to me and says, "Congratulations on another successful run, Liz, and thank you so much for letting me be back in my usual spot." "Of course. Welcome back, buddy. We're so happy you're here." Maxwell, who was dozing, lifts his little head for a moment and meows, then returns to his catnap. Andre swings gently from his spot with an approving nod. Well, everyone, that brings us to the end of this journey. We've driven across Poland, Germany, Switzerland, France, and now Spain. We saw Swinoujscie, Kassel, Zurich, Forca, Genève, Beyrat-le-Château, the industrial area of Lac, Les Forges d'Abel, and so many other places, and finally we arrive here in Valladolid. Along the way, we discuss the Sorites Paradox, its origins, different proposed answers, and why it remains so puzzling. It reveals just how tricky borderline cases can be in language. Maybe we'll never all agree on one perfect solution, but thinking about these problems can help us notice that our words often have fuzzy edges. We also chatted about the documentary For Sama, which shows the profound weight of conflict in Syria and the daily bravery of its people. The anime The Elusive Samurai, with its blend of historical references and comic action, and the book Jane Austen's Bookshelf by Rebecca Romney, which shines a spotlight on forgotten women writers. Each of these has reminded me that stories matter, whether they are about real wars in the modern world, legends of feudal eras, or the quieter revolutions of women authors centuries ago. They all revolve around human experiences, the everyday transformations that end up shaping entire narratives. And now that we are here in Valladolid, I want to say a huge thank you for staying with me during this long trip. It's been a joy to have your company. I hope you found this chat about the Sorites Paradox as intriguing as I did. I'd love to hear your reflections, so feel free to comment or send a message. Also, I have a poll up on my posts. Please take a moment to vote on what you liked our next topic to be about. Should we talk about a different philosophical puzzle? Something more about history or culture? Maybe a lighter theme? You decide. For now, I'll sign off. I need to finish the delivery paperwork and find a place to rest for the night. As always, it's been a pleasure sharing these hours with you. I'm sending warm regards from me, Mish the Fish, Andre, and Maxwell. Drive safe, stay thoughtful, and I'll see you next time on Truck Talk with Liz. Take care, everyone, and give Mish a bit of patience as he continues to recover. We appreciate every kind word you send our way. Until next time, bye for now.